Hello, my lovely students. I hope you're having a fantastic day. This lecture is also titled The Eastern Hemisphere. It is part 2, and the focus is going to be on Asia. In my previous lecture, I introduced the Eastern Hemisphere, so let's go ahead and do a quick review. If we basically take this line that I've drawn and split our globe in half, this line is a longitude line that we call the prime meridian. Everything on the left half of my line, we're going to call the western half of the world or the Western Hemisphere, which makes everything to the right of my line called the eastern half of the world or the Eastern Hemisphere. Last lecture was on Africa. This time we're going to take a look over here at Asia. Again, we're looking at a time period that we call the Middle Ages. The country we're going to focus on is one of my favorite countries to visit. The country is Japan. And just to show off a little bit of my very minimal language skills, here you go. Skoshi Nihongo o hanashimasu. That means I only speak a little Japanese. So where is Japan? Japan is right here, showed by the curvature of my black line. And what you might notice is Japan is not one contiguous country, meaning all the landmass is not touching. In fact, Japan is a collection of islands. There are about 6,852 islands that comprise the country of Japan. We call this a collection of islands, an archipelago. So an archipelago is a collection or a chain of islands. There are 4 main islands of Japan. I'm going to identify them from north to south. We have Hokkaido, we have Honshu, Shikoku, and finally Kyushu. There are also, of course, is a capital of Japan, and that capital you may know is Tokyo. There are 2 other cities you may have heard of in Japan. They are prominent cities because during World War II, the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs, one on each of them. The first city over here is Hiroshima, and the one just south of Hiroshima is Nagasaki. The country next to Japan to the west is what we call the Koreas, or North and South Korea. This is the Korean Peninsula. And in between Korea and Japan is the Sea of Japan. This clearly seems to be from the Japanese perspective. Further to the west of Korea is the country of China. And all of these countries lie close to, touching, etc., the Pacific Ocean. Japan's geography is a bit challenging. You may notice on this map that there are a lot of mountains, and these mountains can pose some challenges, like I said. For example, take a look at this. This is a scene caused by an earthquake. There are about 1,500 earthquakes per year, and while some of them may be small and cause minimal damage, some of them are much larger and cause a lot of damage. There are also this. What we're looking at here is a tsunami. A tsunami, they are giant waves caused by earthquakes or volcanic eruptions under the sea. This is a picture showing you a typhoon, and it's a term used to describe a rotating, organized system of clouds and thunderstorms that originate in tropical or subtropical waters. Depending on where they originate, they actually can be called hurricanes. The mountains can actually disrupt the spin of the typhoon and actually cause it to weaken. So in some regards, Japan may be a buffer for some of the other Asian countries that exist to the west of Japan. And I wanted to show you this picture that there's an expression called the Ring of Fire. And this is a path along the Pacific Ocean where there are lots of active volcanoes and frequent earthquakes. And you can see that Japan exists in this Ring of Fire. Ancient Japan was pretty isolated. Not like in today's world where technology and international relations makes for a very interconnected world. And because of their isolation, they were culturally unique and they were culturally unified. And I think one of the best examples of this is their belief system called Shintoism. This is an image of what's called a torii gate. It's a traditional Japanese gate most commonly found at the entrance or within a Shinto shrine. And it symbolically marks the transition from the mundane or the regular, the outside world to the sacred or holy world. So Shintoism is a belief that spiritual powers exist in the natural world. And these spirits or spiritual powers were called kami, and they lived in natural places. Those of you who may know a little bit about World War II might know the word kamikaze. Kamikaze actually translates to divine wind, and it was a concept that was applied during World War II as a means of warfare against Japanese enemies, the Allied powers. And what they would do is they would load a Japanese aircraft full of explosives and have it make a deliberate suicidal crash on an enemy target. Again, this was seen as divine wind. This was something that was important to defend your country, to defend the spirits, and to sacrifice your life. Here are some pictures of torii gates and of Shinto shrines. What you might notice is that they exist in nature. It is a celebration of the spirits who reside in nature. And so, of course, a Shinto shrine would be found very close to the natural scene. Something else about Shintoism is that it does coexist with Buddhism. So it is the kind of belief system that can coexist with other belief systems. We've talked about the origins of Buddhism, how they originated in India, spread to China, eventually to the Korean Peninsula, and eventually to Japan. Another thing about Shintoism is that it does include emperor and ancestor worship. While the Japanese were, in fact, very isolated and culturally unique, there are still some influences that they gained from the Chinese. For one, their writing. Their writing is a calligraphy kind of writing. And if you look at this picture, you can kind of see that there's a lot of similarity between the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Korean calligraphy. A second influence is architecture. And I'm highlighting here this pagoda style architecture. And you can see by these images what I'm talking about when I say the pagoda style. While each picture may look slightly different than the other one, the same kind of um, roofing that's curved is highlighted here. And finally, of course, the religion of Buddhism, which I just mentioned. Just as a reminder, Buddhism originates in India and eventually spreads because of Prince Ashoka's missionaries to China and eventually makes its way all the way to Japan. Here are a variety of different pictures of Buddhas. Just as Buddhism exists in a variety of different places, the images and the depictions of Buddha differs as well. Buddhism, as a reminder, was founded by Siddhartha Gautama. Buddhists accept what are called the Four Noble Truths, and Buddhists believe that if they follow the Eightfold Path, they will achieve enlightenment. This concludes our look into the Eastern Hemisphere with a focus on Asia, and in particular Japan. There will be a follow-up lesson that will focus in particular on China. That's all for now. Take care and see you next time.